I still dream about that day sometimes. The polished marble floors of Fort Hood's ceremonial hall gleaming under crystal chandeliers. The crowd of officers and dignitaries in their dress uniforms, medals glinting like stars against midnight blue fabric. The smell of polish and perfume and power hanging in the air. And Commander Joseph Holloway, standing at the podium, chest puffed with pride. His voice booming across the hall as he praised his son Cameron. My name is Major Natalie Green, and for 6 years I was the invisible soldier. The officer everyone underestimated. The woman they called too soft for command, while they handed promotions, accolades, and opportunities to Cameron Holloway, not because he earned them, but because his father commanded the base. I can still feel the weight of that moment pressing down on my shoulders as I stood at attention in the back row. The Tesla keys dangling from Commander Holloway's fingers, the $75 million defense contract documents laid out on the podium, the medals arranged in a velvet-lined box. All of it meant for Cameron. None of it earned. But I never expected what happened next. Never anticipated the door opening at the back of the hall. Never imagined the Minister of Defense himself walking through with sealed documents in hand and determination in his eyes. I never thought my silence would speak so loudly. This is my story. My first day at Fort Hood, I arrived 30 minutes early, uniform pressed to perfection, boots polished until I could see my reflection. West Point had taught me discipline, but my father, a retired sergeant major with 3 tours in Afghanistan, had taught me excellence. Green women work twice as hard for half the recognition, he'd say. But we do it anyway, because it's not about the medals. It's about knowing who you are when no one's looking. I believed him then. I still do. Commander Holloway's office smelled like leather and wood polish. He sat behind a mahogany desk, not bothering to stand when I entered, his eyes barely glancing up from the papers before him. Major Green, he said, the words falling flat between us. Your record is adequate. Adequate. I had graduated top of my class at West Point, had led complex training exercises in 4 countries, had received commendations from 3 different commanding officers. But here in this office, I was adequate. Thank you for the opportunity, sir, I replied, standing straight, my voice steady. I look forward to serving under your command. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. We run a tight ship here, Major. No room for hesitation or softness. I need officers who can make hard calls. I understand, sir. Do you? He leaned back. We'll see. The door opened before he could continue, and a young man strode in without knocking. He wore his uniform with casual confidence, his posture relaxed but commanding. He looked like a younger version of Holloway. Same square jaw, same calculating eyes. Dad, he said, then caught himself. Sir, I didn't realize you were in a meeting. Cameron? Holloway's face transformed, pride replacing indifference. Come in. Meet our, new tactical officer, Major Green. Cameron Holloway extended his hand, his grip firm but his eyes disinterested. Welcome to Fort Hood, Major. Lieutenant Holloway is one of our finest, Commander Holloway said, not bothering to hide the pride in his voice. On a fast track to greatness, he just developed a new tactical approach that saved us millions in the Harrison simulation. It was nothing, Cameron said, but his smile said otherwise. Nothing? The Pentagon called personally to commend you. Commander Holloway turned to me. You'll be working with Cameron on the Thompson operation. He'll show you the ropes around here. I knew what that meant. I would be doing the work, and Cameron would be getting the credit. I'd seen it before with other commanding officers' favorites. But I hadn't expected it to be so blatant, so immediate. I look forward to it, I lied. That night, I called my father from my sparse new quarters, the sound of distant training exercises punctuating our conversation. They've already written me off, Dad, I said, keeping my voice low even though I was alone. The commander has this son who's the golden boy. You should have seen how he looked at him versus how he looked at me. That's politics, Natalie, my father replied, his voice gruff with experience. Military's no different than anywhere else. People play favorites. It's more than that. It's like, I'm already invisible. Then use it, he said simply. Invisible people see everything and surprise everyone. Your mother and I didn't raise you to need applause. After we hung up, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall, thinking about what my father had said. Use it. Being underestimated could be an advantage if I played it right. I could observe, learn, and build my case silently. The next morning, I arrived at the tactical center to find Cameron already there, surrounded by a group of officers who laughed at something he'd said. He was holding court, his father's charisma, evident in every gesture. "Major Green," he nodded when he saw me. "We're discussing the Thompson operation. I've divided the teams already." He slid a folder toward me. "Your squad will handle perimeter security during the main exercise." Perimeter security, the military equivalent of watching paint dry. Meanwhile, Cameron's team would be running the main tactical exercise, the one that would, catch attention from higher-ups. "With respect, Lieutenant," I said carefully. "I've run similar operations at Fort Benning and Camp Lejeune. I'd be happy to provide input on the main tactical approach." The room went quiet. Someone coughed. Cameron's smile tightened. "I'm sure you would," he said. "But my father, Commander Holloway, approved my plan yesterday. We're moving forward as outlined." I took the folder. Understood. Over the next 3 months, a pattern emerged. I would excel at whatever mundane task they assigned me. I would develop improvements, work late, train my squad to perfection. And then Cameron would take the most promising aspects of my work, incorporate them into his presentations, and receive accolades from his father. "She's smart," I overheard Cameron tell another officer in the mess hall one evening. "But she's too soft for real command. No killer instinct. Dad says you can always tell who has it and who doesn't." I gripped my tray harder and walked past them, pretending I hadn't heard. But the words sank into me, became part of how I saw myself in their eyes. The competent but soft major, the officer who would never lead. Then came the Blackwater simulation, a complex multi-day training exercise designed to mimic urban warfare conditions. Cameron's squad went first, making solid but unremarkable progress through the scenario. Commander Holloway watched from the observation deck, nodding approvingly at every move his son made, even when mistakes occurred. When my squad's turn came, I had spent weeks preparing. We moved through the simulation with precision and innovation, adapting to unexpected scenarios, preventing simulated civilian casualties, securing objectives in record time. It was flawless execution, the kind that should have turned heads. As we completed the final objective, I looked up to the observation deck. Commander Holloway was watching, his expression unreadable. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something like respect flicker across his face. Then he turned to the officers beside him and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Technically proficient, but there's no fire there, no real leadership." He gestured toward Cameron. "That's what a future general looks like." I maintained my composure as we exited the simulation zone, congratulating my squad on their performance, ignoring the looks of sympathy some of them gave me. I wouldn't let them see me break. I wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction. That night, alone in my quarters, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. "Too soft," I whispered to myself, testing how the words felt in my mouth. They tasted bitter. I thought about quitting, about requesting a transfer, about confronting Holloway. Instead, I opened my laptop and began working on improvements to our tactical approach. I would be better. I would be so good they couldn't ignore me. And if they did anyway, if the Holloways kept dismissing me, at least I would know my own worth. What I didn't know then was that someone else was watching. Someone whose opinion would matter more than Commander Holloway's ever could. 6 months into my posting at Fort Hood, I had established a reputation. Competent, thorough, invisible. My squad performed exceptionally in every assignment, but the credit always seemed to evaporate before it reached me. Meanwhile, Cameron Holloway collected commendations like some officers collected coffee mugs. "You know what your problem is, Green," Lieutenant Colonel Vance said to me one evening as we reviewed training protocols. He was one of the few senior officers who seemed to notice me at all. "You don't advertise. Military's like any other business. Gotta sell yourself." "With respect, sir, I believe my work should speak for itself," I replied, not looking up from the documents before me. He chuckled. "In a perfect world, sure. But this isn't that world. This is Holloway's world. And in his world, the loudest voice gets the promotion." I finally met his eyes. "I'm not going to change who I am to fit his expectations." "Then you're going to keep being invisible," he said, not unkindly. "Shame, too. You're twice the officer Cameron is." My first real test came during Operation Desert Shield, a joint training exercise with 3 allied nations, hundreds of troops, millions in equipment, and global media attention. Commander Holloway assigned Cameron to lead the primary assault team, the most visible, prestigious position. I was given logistics and supply chain management, the glamorous work of counting bullets and tracking fuel consumption. I threw myself into it anyway, developing a new distribution system that reduced delivery times by 43%. I worked 18-hour days, coordinating with allied forces, streamlining communications, eliminating redundancies. My team responded to my dedication, working just as hard, just as focused. 3 days into the exercise, a severe dust storm hit the operation zone. Communications went down, supply lines were disrupted, and Cameron's team found themselves stranded without provisions, their position compromised. I received the distress call at 0200 hours. Major Green, the voice crackled over the emergency channel. We've lost contact with command. We're low on supplies and have injured personnel, requesting immediate assistance. Protocol dictated I notify Commander Holloway, but notifications would take time, and time was something Cameron's team didn't have. Roger that, I replied. Hold position. Assistance inbound. I assembled a small team, loaded 2 transport vehicles with medical supplies and ammunition, and plotted a route through the storm using topographical mapping I'd memorized. We moved out without waiting for formal authorization. The storm was brutal, visibility reduced to mere feet, the wind howling like a wounded animal. We navigated by compass and dead reckoning, pushing through conditions that had grounded the helicopters and disabled GPS systems. We found Cameron's team sheltering in an abandoned structure, 2 men injured, supplies critically low. When I entered, the relief on their faces was palpable, followed quickly by surprise when they recognized me. Major Green, Cameron said, disbelief evident in his voice. How did you find us in this? Good navigation and better luck, I replied, already directing my team to distribute supplies and treat the injured. We need to stabilize these men and secure this position until the storm passes. For the next 14 hours, we held that position together. The storm raged, communications remained sporadic, and we relied on each other's skills to keep everyone safe. In those hours, rank and name didn't matter, only competence did. When the storm finally broke and evacuation helicopters arrived, Commander Holloway was on the first one. He embraced his son, checked the injured men, and then, almost as an afterthought, turned to me. You disobeyed protocol, Major, he said, his voice cold. You should have notified command before moving out. Before I could respond, one of Cameron's team stepped forward. Sir, with respect, if Major Green had waited for authorization, we might not have made it. She saved our asses, sir. Commander Holloway's jaw tightened. He looked at me, then at the soldier, then at his son. Is this accurate, Lieutenant Holloway? Cameron hesitated, ambition and honesty warring visibly on his face. Finally, he nodded. Yes, sir. Major Green's actions were decisive and effective. It was the closest thing to praise I'd ever get from a Holloway. The commander's response was a curt nod. We'll discuss this at base, all of you, on the helicopters now. Back at Fort Hood, I expected reprimand. Instead, there was silence. No official recognition of my actions, but no punishment either. The mission was recorded as a success, with special mention of leadership adaptability under adverse conditions, but the EGE report credited the entire command structure, not me specifically. Cameron, meanwhile, received a Bronze Star for exceptional leadership during critical conditions. It's bullshit, my squad leader, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, said when she heard. Everyone knows you're the reason that mission didn't go sideways. Everyone except the people who write the reports, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Why don't you fight it? File a formal recognition request? You've earned it. I considered her question carefully. Because I didn't do it for recognition, Rodriguez. I did it because it was the right call. She shook her head. You're a better person than me, Major. I'd be raising hell. Perhaps I should have. Perhaps silence was the wrong strategy. But I had been raised to believe that true honor doesn't need applause. And despite everything, I still believe that. What I didn't realize then was that others were watching. Quiet observers, taking notes, forming opinions that would eventually matter more than Commander Holloway's ever could. The real turning point came 3 months later, when Fort Hood hosted a delegation from the Pentagon, high-ranking officials, defense, contractors, and military strategists arrived for a week-long demonstration of our latest tactical innovations. It was, everyone understood, a massive opportunity for career advancement. Commander Holloway called an officers' meeting the day before the delegation arrived. This is our chance to shine, he announced, pacing before us like a general rallying troops. I've selected the demonstration teams carefully. Lieutenant Holloway will lead the primary tactical demonstration. He nodded toward his son. Major Green, your team will handle security and facility management. Again. Always. I would be the invisible officer making sure the bathrooms had toilet paper while Cameron showcased his brilliance to the Pentagon. Sir, I said, my voice calm but firm, my team has developed several tactical innovations that might interest the delegation. We've improved response times by 37% using a new communication protocol. The room went silent. I rarely challenged assignments publicly. Commander Holloway's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting you should lead the demonstration, Major? I'm suggesting my team has valuable contributions to offer, sir. He studied me for a moment, then smiled, thinly. Your dedication is noted, Major, but the schedule is set. Lieutenant Holloway has been preparing this demonstration for weeks. With my innovations, I thought, but didn't say. Understood, sir, I replied, returning to attention. As the meeting dispersed, Cameron approached me, his expression unreadable. That was gutsy, he said quietly, questioning my father's decisions in front of everyone. I was advocating for my team, I replied. They've worked hard. He studied me for a moment. You really believe in all this, don't you? Honor, fairness, merit, don't you? His laugh was short and humorless. This is the military, Green. It's about who you know, not what you do. It shouldn't be, but it is. He shrugged. For what it's worth, your communication protocol is solid. I incorporated parts of it into the demonstration. Without credit, of course. Always without credit. The delegation arrived the next day, a procession of stars and bars and serious expressions. Among them was a figure I didn't recognize. A tall, stern-looking man who spoke little but watched everything with intense focus. He wasn't wearing military uniform, but the others deferred to him subtly. As I supervised security arrangements, he approached me. Major Green, he said, not a question but a statement. I came to attention. Yes, sir. At ease, Major. He extended his hand. Michael Sullivan, Department of Defense. I shook his hand, confused by his interest. How can I assist you, sir? I'm interested in this communication protocol I keep hearing about, the one that improved response times by 37%. My heart skipped. You've heard about that, sir? I make it my business to know about innovations that save lives, Major. Would you have time to brief me on it? Privately? For the next hour, in a small conference room away from the main events, I walked Michael Sullivan through my team's innovations. He asked precise, intelligent questions. He took notes. He listened. It was the first time in my entire posting at Fort Hood that I felt truly seen. As our meeting concluded, Sullivan stood and extended his hand again. Impressive work, Major Green. Genuinely innovative. Thank you, sir. He paused at the door. One more question, if I may. Why aren't you leading the tactical demonstrations this week? The question caught me off guard. I considered my options carefully before answering. Command decisions are made based on many factors, sir. I respect the chain of command. Sullivan studied me, his expression thoughtful. Diplomatic answer, Major, but not very illuminating. It's the only answer I can give, sir. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Thank you for your time, Major Green. I have a feeling we'll be speaking again. I had no idea then how prophetic those words would be. 3 weeks after the Pentagon delegation departed, Fort Hood buzzed with rumors. Whispers of a special commendation, a prestigious assignment, a career-making opportunity, all supposedly coming from Michael Sullivan himself. The rumors weren't specific about who would receive this golden ticket, but everyone assumed it would be Cameron Holloway. Who else would it be? I kept my head down and focused on my work, developing a new training protocol for urban combat situations. My team had embraced the challenge with enthusiasm, grateful for assignments that utilized their intelligence rather than just their endurance. They had become fiercely loyal, not because I demanded it, but because I recognized their potential when others didn't. Major Green. Commander Holloway's aide appeared at the door of our training facility. The commander requests your presence in his office immediately. The walk to his office felt longer than usual, the polished floors stretching endlessly before me. I had been summoned to that office many times, usually to explain why I had stepped beyond my assigned boundaries, rarely to receive praise. I knocked once, then entered at his command. Commander Holloway wasn't alone. Cameron stood beside him, both men looking unusually somber. Major Green, Holloway said, not inviting me to sit. We've received communication from the Pentagon regarding your meeting with Michael Sullivan. My pulse quickened. Yes, sir? It appears you made quite an impression. His tone made it clear this wasn't a compliment. Sullivan has requested detailed documentation on all tactical innovations developed under your command during the past year. I kept my face neutral, though inside, a small flame of vindication flickered to life. I'd be happy to provide that documentation, sir. I'm sure you would. Holloway's eyes narrowed. What I want to know is why you felt it appropriate to discuss operational details with a Pentagon official without going through proper channels. Sullivan requested the briefing directly, sir. I assumed you had authorized it. You assumed wrong. He stood, pacing behind his desk. In this command, Major, we maintain a unified front. We don't seek individual recognition at the expense of unit cohesion. The hypocrisy was so blatant I almost laughed. Almost. With respect, sir, I wasn't seeking recognition. I was responding to a direct request from a Department of Defense official. Cameron shifted uncomfortably beside his father. For once, he seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Dad, sir, he corrected himself. Major Green was just doing her job. Sullivan approached her, not the other way around. Commander Holloway shot his son a look that silenced him immediately. Nevertheless, the commander continued, this has created a complicated situation. Sullivan is now requesting that you personally present your innovations at the Pentagon next month. The news hit me like a physical blow. A Pentagon presentation was career gold, the kind of opportunity officers waited years to receive. I'm honored, sir, I managed to say. Don't be too honored yet, Holloway replied coldly. I've informed Sullivan that our tactical innovations are team efforts. Lieutenant Holloway will accompany you to provide context and leadership perspective. Of course, I should have expected it. Even this victory would be diluted, shared with Cameron, who would undoubtedly be positioned as the primary contributor. Understood, sir, I said, keeping my voice steady. Dismissed, Major. As I turned to leave, Cameron caught my eye. For a split second, I thought I saw something like apology in his expression. Then it was gone, replaced by the confident mask he always wore. Outside, I allowed myself a moment of frustration, hidden in an empty stairwell where no one could see the way my hands shook with suppressed rage. It wasn't fair. None of it was. Fair. But fairness, I was learning, had little place in Commander Holloway's world. I called my father that night, needing the grounding of his voice. They're sending Cameron with me, I said after explaining the situation. He'll end up getting the credit. Again. My father was quiet for a moment. You know why they're doing this, don't you? Because Holloway wants his son to succeed. No, my father said. Because they're scared of you, Natalie. I almost dropped the phone. Scared? Of me? That's ridiculous. Is it? You're smart. You're innovative. You're respected by your subordinates. And now you've caught the attention of someone powerful. They're not protecting Cameron's reputation. They're trying to dim your light because it's starting to outshine his. His words settled into me, rearranging my understanding of the situation. Could it be true? Were they actually intimidated by me? What do? I asked. What you've always done, my father replied. Your best. Let your work speak for itself. The right people will hear it, even if the Holloways try to drown it out. The Pentagon presentation loomed like a storm on the horizon. For 4 weeks, I prepared obsessively, refining my tactical models, practicing my delivery, anticipating questions. Cameron, to my surprise, actually contributed meaningful insights. Away from his father's shadow, he showed glimmers of the officer he could be, if merit, not nepotism, guided his career. Why are you helping me? I asked him one evening as we reviewed presentation materials. This could be your big moment if you wanted it. To be. He looked up, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. Because it's your work, Green, not mine. He shrugged. Besides, I'm getting tired of being handed things I didn't earn. I didn't know whether to believe him. But for those few weeks, we worked together as equals, perhaps even as something close to friends. The day before we were scheduled to depart for Washington, Commander, Holloway called me into his office again. This time, Cameron wasn't present. Major Green, he began without preamble. There's been a change of plans. The Pentagon has scaled back the presentations due to scheduling conflicts. Only one officer from Fort Hood will attend. My heart sank. I already knew what was coming. I've selected Lieutenant Holloway to represent our command, he continued, not meeting my eyes. He has the most experience with high-level briefings. The injustice of it burned like acid in my throat. Sir, with respect, these are my innovations. I developed them. I tested them. I implemented them. With resources provided by this command, under the leadership structure I established, Holloway countered, his voice hardening. This isn't a request, Major. It's a decision. Lieutenant Holloway will present at the Pentagon. You will provide him with all necessary materials and briefing notes. I stood rigid, fighting to maintain my composure. Yes, sir. Dismissed. I left his office, each step carefully measured, my face a mask of professional detachment. Inside, I was screaming. Cameron found me later in the tactical room, surrounded by the presentation, materials I'd spent weeks preparing. "I just heard," he said, hovering in the doorway. "I didn't ask for this, Green. You have to believe that." I looked up at him, suddenly exhausted by all of it. The favoritism, the politics, the constant struggle to be seen. "Does it matter whether you asked for it?" I said quietly. "You got it anyway. You always do." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It isn't fair. None of this is fair. But that's how it works at Fort Hood, isn't it? Your father decides, and the rest of us fall in line." I could decline, he offered, though we both knew he wouldn't. "Tell him you should go instead." I almost laughed at the suggestion. "And sacrifice your career for mine? We both know that's not happening, Lieutenant." He had no response to that. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, I handed him a flash drive. "Everything you need is on here. The presentation is organized chronologically. Start with the problem statement, then move into the innovation process." My voice was professional, detached. If Sullivan asks about implementation challenges, emphasize the communication difficulties we overcame in the field. Test. Cameron took the drive, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "I'll make sure they know it was your work." "No, you won't," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "Because that's not how this game is played. Is it, Cameron?" He left without another word, and I remained alone in the tactical room, surrounded by the evidence of work that would never bear my name. The Pentagon. Presentation came and went. Cameron returned to Fort Hood carrying a commendation letter and stories of impressed generals. Commander Holloway arranged a small ceremony to recognize his son's innovative contributions to tactical doctrine, a phrase that tasted like ash in my mouth as I stood at attention, watching from the back row. I should have been angry. I had every right to be. But instead, I felt a strange, calm clarity. This system, this broken, nepotistic system, wasn't going to change. Not for me, not for anyone. The only thing I could control was how I responded to it. So I made a decision. I would continue doing excellent work, not for recognition, but because excellence was who I was. And I would document everything meticulously. Every innovation, every success, every contribution, creating a record that couldn't be erased or rewritten. 2 months after the Pentagon presentation, something unexpected happened. Fort Hood received notification of a major joint exercise, Operation Northern Light, to be conducted with Canadian and British forces in Alaska. It would be the largest such exercise in a decade, with international observers and significant media coverage. Commander Holloway called a command staff meeting to announce the assignments. "This is a prestigious opportunity," he told the assembled officers, pacing before us with barely contained excitement. "All eyes will be on Fort Hood. We will demonstrate American military superiority and tactical innovation. No prizes for guessing who would lead our contingent." Cameron stood a little straighter as his father continued. "Lieutenant Holloway will serve as operation commander for our forces," Holloway announced, surprising no one. "Major Green will—" "Excuse me, Commander," a voice interrupted from the doorway. We all turned to see a colonel I didn't recognize, flanked by 2 aides. The insignia on his uniform identified him as being from the Pentagon's Joint Operations Command. "Colonel Davis," Holloway said, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "We're in the middle of a briefing." "My apologies, Commander," Colonel Davis replied, not sounding particularly apologetic. "I have orders from General Marshall regarding Operation Northern Light." He handed Holloway an envelope bearing the Pentagon seal. The commander opened it, his expression darkening as he read its contents. "This must be a mistake," he said finally, looking up at Davis. "No mistake, sir. The orders come directly from the Joint Chiefs, based on recommendations from the Department of Defense." Holloway's face flushed with barely controlled anger. "Colonel, a word in private, please." They disappeared into Holloway's office, leaving the rest of us in confused silence. Cameron caught my eye across the room, his expression questioning. I shrugged slightly, equally baffled. 20 minutes later, the door reopened. Commander Holloway emerged, his face a rigid mask, Colonel Davis following with a satisfied expression. "Change of plans," Holloway announced, his voice tight. "By direct order of the Pentagon, Major Green will serve as Operation Commander for Northern Light." The room went completely silent. I felt every eye turn toward me, expressions ranging from shock to confusion to, from a few, satisfaction. Major Green has been specifically requested based on her tactical innovations, which apparently impressed certain officials at the Department of Defense, Holloway continued, each word clearly painful for him to speak. Lieutenant Holloway will serve as her second in command. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. This couldn't be happening. Congratulations, Major, Colonel Davis said, extending his hand. Michael Sullivan speaks very highly of you. Don't make him regret it. As the meeting dispersed, I remained rooted to my spot, struggling to process what had just happened. Cameron approached, his expression unreadable. Congratulations, he said, his voice low. Looks like your work finally spoke for itself. Cameron, Save it, he cut me off. Just tell me one thing. Did you go around my father to make this happen? The accusation stung. No, I had no idea Sullivan was watching this closely. He studied my face, searching for deception, then nodded once. Okay, then I guess I'll see you at 0700 tomorrow to start planning. Commander. He left before I could respond, his back rigid with what might have been anger or wounded pride. Commander Holloway was less subtle. He summoned me to his office that afternoon, his fury barely contained. I don't know what game you're playing, Major, he said as soon as the door closed behind me. But understand this. You may have impressed Sullivan, but you still serve under my command. One mistake, one failure. In this operation, and I'll make sure your career ends at Fort Hood. I kept my composure, meeting his gaze steadily. I understand, sir. I won't let the command down. See that you don't. He turned away dismissively. Dismissed, Major. The next 6 weeks were the most intense of my career. Operation Northern Light was massive in scope. 3 nations, thousands of troops, complex terrain, and intricate logistics. I threw myself into the planning, working 18-hour days, coordinating with British and Canadian commanders, developing contingencies for every possible scenario. To my surprise, Cameron proved to be a valuable ally. Whatever resentment he felt about being placed under my command, he kept it private. In planning sessions, he was focused and constructive, offering insights I might have missed and supporting my decisions publicly. Why are you being so helpful? I asked him one night as we reviewed topographical maps of the exercise area. Your father would probably prefer you sabotage me. Cameron looked up, something like respect in his eyes. Because this is bigger than my father's ego or your vindication, Green. It's about doing the job right. And besides, he added with a faint smile, I'm learning a lot from you. It was the closest thing to friendship we'd ever shared. The operation itself was a masterclass in precision and adaptation. We faced extreme weather conditions, equipment malfunctions, and last-minute changes from our allied partners. Through it all, my team, my command, performed flawlessly. We completed every objective, protected every asset, and demonstrated tactical innovations that had international observers taking notes. On the final day, as we conducted the after-action review, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride without reservation. Not just in myself, but in every soldier under my command, including Cameron Holloway. Outstanding work, Major Green, the British commander said, shaking my hand vigorously. Your tactical approach to the ridge scenario was brilliant. Saved us hours of potential engagement. Thank you, sir, but it was a team effort, I replied, meaning it sincerely. A team that clearly respects its commander, he observed with a knowing smile. When we returned to Fort Hood, I expected the usual. A muted acknowledgement of success, followed by a return to invisibility. Instead, I found Michael Sullivan waiting in the command center, accompanied by 2 generals and what appeared to be a defense contractor in an expensive suit. Major Green, Sullivan greeted me warmly. Exceptional work in Alaska. You've confirmed every good thing I thought about your leadership capabilities. Thank you, sir, I replied, acutely aware of Commander Holloway watching from across the room, his expression thunderous. We should discuss your future, Major. I believe you're ready for greater challenges. Those words, spoken in the presence of Holloway, were perhaps the sweetest vindication I could have imagined. The weeks following Operation Northern Light brought changes I hadn't dared to hope for. My name appeared in official reports. Officers who had previously looked through me now sought my opinion. Even Commander Holloway, while never warm, began treating me with grudging professional respect, at least in public. Michael Sullivan's interest in my career proved to be more than passing. He requested my presence at strategic planning sessions, included me in video conferences with Pentagon officials, and mentioned my tactical innovations in briefings to Allied commands. My invisibility was evaporating. replaced by a spotlight I hadn't sought but couldn't deny feeling gratified by. Cameron and I maintained our unexpected professional alliance, though I sensed the strain it placed on his relationship with his father. Once, passing the commander's office, I overheard raised voices. "You're too friendly with her," Holloway was saying. "She's undermining, everything we've built." "She's a good officer," Cameron replied, "and she earned that Alaska command." "Since when do you care about what's earned rather than what's given?" his father shot back. I walked away before I could hear Cameron's response, uncomfortable with my accidental eavesdropping, but unable to unhear the confirmation of what I'd always suspected. In Holloway's world, merit was secondary to loyalty and bloodline. 3 months after Alaska, Fort Hood received notification of a prestigious honor. The base had been selected to host the annual Military Excellence Awards, where the Secretary of Defense would personally present commendations to outstanding service members from all branches. It was, everyone understood, a direct result of our performance in Northern Light. Commander Holloway called a staff meeting to announce the news. For once, he seemed genuinely pleased with the entire command, not just his son. "This is unprecedented," he told us, actual pride in his voice. "Fort Hood has never hosted the Excellence Awards. The eyes of the entire military establishment will be on us." I sat quietly in the back row, taking notes as Holloway outlined the extensive preparations needed. The base would be transformed. Renovations to the main hall, security upgrades, accommodations for VIPs, media management plans. "Major Green," Holloway said suddenly, causing me to look up in surprise. "You'll coordinate with Pentagon liaison on the award ceremony details. Lieutenant Holloway will handle security and logistics." It was a significant assignment, not the most prestigious, but certainly not the background role I would have been given 6 months earlier. Progress, however, incremental. "Yes, sir," I replied, keeping my tone professionally neutral, despite the small thrill of validation. After the meeting, Cameron approached me in the corridor, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Looks like you're officially out of the shadows, Green," he said, falling into step beside me. "For now," I replied cautiously. "Your father could change his mind tomorrow." Cameron shook his head. "Not with Sullivan watching so closely. Dad's many things, but politically stupid isn't one of them." We walked in silence for a moment before he spoke again, his voice lower. "Have you heard the rumors about the special commendation?" "What special commendation?" He glanced around before answering. "Word is the secretary is bringing a special honor for someone at Fort Hood. Something big, career-changing big." My stomach tightened. "For you?" "That's the assumption," he replied, his expression unreadable. "Dad certainly thinks so. He's already planning my promotion party." The familiar feeling of disappointment settled over me, but it was duller now, blunted by months of small victories. "Well, congratulations in advance." Cameron studied me for a moment. "You know what's strange? A year ago, I would have felt entitled to it. Now," he shrugged, "now I'm not sure I deserve it more than certain other officers." Before I could respond to this unprecedented admission, he nodded curtly and walked away, leaving me staring after him in confusion. Was Cameron Holloway actually developing a conscience? Or was this another game I didn't understand? The preparations for the Excellence Awards consumed the next 2 months. I worked directly with Pentagon officials, including Sullivan, who seemed increasingly invested in my career trajectory. During one planning call, after we'd finalized the ceremony details, he lingered on the line, after others had disconnected. "Major Green," he said, his voice warm with approval, "I want you to know that your work hasn't gone unnoticed. Not just in Alaska, but throughout your career." "Thank you, sir," I replied, uncertain where this was heading. "I've reviewed your complete service record," he continued, "including missions and innovations that never made it into official reports." My breath caught. "Sir?" "Let's just say I have sources at Fort Hood who recognize talent even when others try to bury it." He paused meaningfully. "The Secretary is very interested in meeting you, Major." The implication hung in the air between us, too tantalizing to acknowledge directly. Could Cameron's rumors about a special commendation be wrong? Could it possibly be intended for me? "I look forward to meeting the Secretary as well, sir," I replied carefully. Sullivan's chuckle suggested he understood my caution. "Excellent work on the preparations, Major. I'll see you on ceremony day." As the date approached, Fort Hood transformed. The main hall underwent a stunning renovation, emerging as a gleaming showcase of military precision and pride. Security protocols tightened. Press credentials were scrutinized, and VIP accommodations were prepared to exacting standards. Commander Holloway became increasingly tense, micromanaging details and snapping at subordinates. The pressure of hosting such a high-profile event seemed to be wearing on him, or perhaps it was the weight of expectations for his son's presumed commendation. The night before the ceremony, I worked late in the tactical center, finalizing seating arrangements and security protocols. Cameron found me there looking uncharacteristically troubled. "Got a minute?" he asked, closing the door behind him. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. "What's wrong? Is there a problem with the security arrangements?" "No, everything's on track." He sat heavily, running a hand through his hair. "It's about tomorrow." "About the commendation." My chest tightened. "What about it?" "My father—" He hesitated, then met my eyes directly. "My father altered report screen. For years. He took your work, your innovations, and reassigned credit to me." The words landed like physical blows. I had suspected, of course, but hearing it confirmed by Cameron himself was different, more devastating somehow. "Why, are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because tomorrow matters," he replied simply. "Because the truth should matter. And because I'm tired of being someone I'm not proud of." I studied his face, searching for deceit and finding none. "What exactly are you saying, Cameron?" "I'm saying I don't deserve whatever recognition is coming tomorrow. You do." He stood, abruptly. "That's all. I just needed you to know that. I know." He left before I could respond, the door closing softly behind him. I sat alone in the tactical center, surrounded by plans and protocols, trying to process what had just happened. Cameron Holloway had just acknowledged years of unfairness. He had admitted his complicity. He had, in his way, apologized. It changed nothing. And yet, somehow, it changed everything. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, Fort Hood bustling with activity from before sunrise. Security checks, last-minute preparations, rehearsals for the color guard. The base hummed with nervous energy and anticipation. I dressed carefully in my dress uniform, each medal and commendation precisely placed, my hair immaculate, my boots gleaming. Whatever happened today, whether I remained in the shadows or stepped finally into the light, I would face it with dignity. Commander Holloway had scheduled a final briefing for all senior officers 2 hours before the ceremony. As I walked toward the conference room, I spotted Cameron standing alone in a side corridor, staring out a window. He turned as I approached, his expression solemn. "Major?" "Green." He nodded formally. "Lieutenant Holloway," I replied, matching his tone. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he spoke again. "Whatever happens today," he said quietly, "I want you to know I've learned more from you than from anyone else at Fort Hood, including my father." It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply nodded, acknowledging the weight of his words. "We should get to the briefing," I said finally. "Right." He straightened his shoulders. "Let's face the music." Commander Holloway's final briefing was uncharacteristically brief. He reviewed security protocols, ceremony timing, and VIP handling procedures with military efficiency, his usual grandiosity subdued by the pressure of the impending event. "The Secretary of Defense arrives at 1100 hours, he concluded. "All officers will be in position by 10:30. Full dress uniform, exemplary appearance and conduct." His eyes swept the room. "Fort Hood's reputation is on the line today. I expect nothing less than perfection from each of you." As the briefing dispersed, Holloway called out, "Lieutenant Holloway, Major Green, a word." Cameron and I exchanged glances before approaching the commander's podium. Up close, I could see the strain on Holloway's face, the tightness around his eyes, the slight clench in his jaw. "Sullivan just confirmed," he said without preamble. "The secretary is indeed bringing a special commendation, a significant one." My heart stuttered in my chest. Cameron stood perfectly still beside me. "The details are classified," Holloway continued, "but it involves a substantial promotion and a $75 million defense contract oversight position." The sum was staggering. Such positions were rare, prestigious, career-defining opportunities. "That's significant," Cameron said carefully. Holloway looked at his son, naked pride shining through his professional veneer. "It's everything we've worked for. Everything I've prepared you for." I kept my expression neutral, though inside a familiar disappointment settled like sediment. Of course, Holloway assumed the commendation was for his son. Of course. "The secretary requested both of you be present on stage during the special presentation." Holloway added, glancing at me with barely disguised impatience. Apparently, Sullivan insisted. That was unexpected. Why would Sullivan want me on stage for Cameron's commendation? We'll be ready, sir, I replied, my voice steady. See that you are. He nodded dismissively. Dismissed. As we left the briefing room, Cameron exhaled heavily. Jesus, he muttered. $75 million? Plus promotion, I added, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. He glanced at me sharply. You think it's really for me? Who else would it be for? I replied, the question more resigned than bitter. Holloway's been grooming you for something like this your entire career. Cameron didn't argue. He simply nodded, his expression troubled. Right, of course. We parted ways to oversee our respective responsibilities, the weight of the impending ceremony hanging between us like an unspoken question. By 10:30, Fort Hood's main hall had transformed into a showcase of military pageantry. The stage gleamed under spotlights, flags from all service branches flanked the podium, and rows of chairs were filled with officers in dress uniform, visiting dignitaries and select media representatives. A small table to the side of the stage held what appeared to be ceremonial items under a velvet cloth, presumably including the mysterious commendation. I took my assigned position, standing rigidly at attention as the hall filled. Cameron stood nearby, his face a mask of professional composure belying the emotions that must be churning beneath. Commander Holloway moved through the crowd, shaking hands with VIPs, his chest puffed with anticipated pride. At precisely 1100 hours, the doors opened to admit the Secretary of Defense, flanked by Michael Sullivan and several high-ranking Pentagon officials. The room rose in unison, a sea of uniforms and formal attire standing at attention. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. National anthem, presentation of colors, Secretary's opening remarks about excellence, duty, and the future of American military power. Standard. Commendations presented to selected service members from each branch, each met with appropriate applause. Then came the moment the room had been waiting for. The Secretary returned to the podium, his expression solemn. Today, I have the honor of presenting a special commendation, one that recognizes extraordinary leadership, tactical innovation, and moral courage in the face of challenging circumstances. The hall went completely silent. I could feel Cameron's tension radiating beside me. Commander Holloway sat in the front row, practically vibrating with anticipation. Would Commander Joseph Holloway, Lieutenant Cameron Holloway, and Major Natalie Green please join me on stage? A murmur rippled through the audience. 3 of us, not just Cameron. I caught Sullivan's eye as we climbed the steps to the stage. He gave me a slight nod, his expression unreadable. We stood at attention beside the Secretary, the lights hot on our faces, hundreds of eyes fixed upon us. Commander Holloway positioned himself slightly in front of Cameron and me, his chest expanded with pride. Fort Hood has distinguished itself under Commander Holloway's leadership, the Secretary began, particularly through innovative tactical approaches that have revolutionized our response capabilities. Commander Holloway nodded slightly, accepting the praise as his due. These innovations have saved lives, improved mission outcomes, and positioned America at the forefront of modern military strategy. Another murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. Cameron shifted slightly beside me, his discomfort almost palpable. The Secretary gestured and Sullivan stepped forward, holding a large envelope bearing the Department of Defense seal. Before I present this commendation, the Secretary continued, I want to acknowledge the thorough review conducted by the department. Under Michael Sullivan's direction, we examined years of tactical developments, field reports, and operational outcomes from Fort Hood. Sullivan opened the envelope, removing a document which he handed to the Secretary. Something in Sullivan's expression made my heart rate accelerate. Our review revealed something extraordinary, the Secretary said, his tone shifting subtly. A pattern of excellence and innovation attributed to one officer, but actually originating from another. The room went completely still. Commander Holloway's smile froze on his face. The documentation is conclusive and has been verified by multiple sources, the Secretary continued, his gaze moving pointedly from Commander Holloway to me. Major Natalie Green has been the primary architect of Fort Hood's most significant tactical innovations for the past 6 years, despite receiving minimal official recognition for her contributions. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The Secretary's words seemed to reach me through a tunnel, distant yet earth-shattering. This special commendation, which includes promotion to lieutenant colonel, assignment to the Joint Strategic Command, and oversight of a $75 million defense contract is therefore awarded to Major Natalie Green, effective immediately. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and then, starting with my squad members scattered throughout the audience, applause. Thunderous, validating applause that swept through the hall like a wave. Commander Holloway's face drained of color. Cameron, to my surprise, began applauding as well, a small, genuine smile breaking through his shock. Sullivan stepped forward, handing me the official documentation and shaking my hand firmly. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel Green," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Justice delayed but not denied." I accepted the documents with hands that somehow remained steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. 6 years of invisibility, of being dismissed and overlooked, culminating in this moment of incontrovertible recognition. The secretary pinned new insignia to my uniform, officially marking my promotion to lieutenant colonel. As he did, he spoke quietly, for my ears alone. "Your patience and integrity through years of unacknowledged excellence is the true definition of military honor, Colonel." I managed a crisp, "Thank you, sir," though my voice didn't sound like my own. As I turned to face the audience, still applauding, I caught Commander Holloway's eye. His face had transformed from shock to barely controlled rage, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see a muscle twitching in his cheek. Beside him, Cameron nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, and perhaps, in his way, respect. In that moment, standing on that stage with the weight of vindication pressing down on me like a physical thing, I realized the true nature of strength. It wasn't in the medals, or the rank, or even in the recognition that had finally come. It was in the quiet dignity of doing what was right when no one was watching. It was in the resilience to remain standing when others tried to render you invisible. I had never been invisible. I had been seen all along, by the people who mattered most. The aftermath of the ceremony unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of consequences. Commander Holloway was immediately summoned to a closed-door meeting with the Secretary and senior Pentagon officials. He emerged 2 hours later, his face ashen, his shoulders hunched in a way I had never seen before. The official announcement came the following morning. Commander Joseph Holloway would be retiring from active duty, effective immediately. The phrasing was diplomatic, Sam, to pursue other opportunities, but everyone at Fort Hood understood the truth. This wasn't a voluntary retirement. This was accountability. I found myself in a strange liminal space, simultaneously celebrated and isolated. Officers who had ignored me for years suddenly sought my mentorship. Subordinates who had always respected me now looked at me with something approaching awe. And the Holloways, both of them, kept their distance, processing their new reality in ways I could only imagine. 3 days after the ceremony, as I packed my office for the move to the Pentagon, Cameron appeared in my doorway. He stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets, watching me place tactical manuals into cardboard boxes. "Need help?" he offered finally. I considered, refusing, then nodded. "Sure." We worked in silence for several minutes, the only sound the thud of books against cardboard and the rustle of papers being sorted. "My father received his official reprimand yesterday," Cameron said eventually, not looking up from the box he was packing. "Falsification of records, abuse of power, nepotism." He shook his head. "They're stripping him of his final promotion before retirement, reducing his pension." I paused, a framed certificate in my hands. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in Holloway's humiliation. Cameron shrugged, a gesture so carefully casual it revealed the effort behind it. "Don't be." He made his choices. He finally looked up, meeting my eyes directly. We both did. The admission hung. Between us, honest and painful. "What happens to you now?" I asked. "Reassignment, Fort Bragg, under Colonel Martinez." His lips quirked in a humorless smile. "Back to basics. No favors, no shortcuts. Martinez is a good commander. Tough, but fair. That's what I hear." He sealed the box he'd been packing, then sat on the edge of my desk. "I've spent my whole career being Commander Holloway's son. I'm not sure I know how to be just Lieutenant Holloway." "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're smarter than people give you credit for, including yourself." He looked surprised, then grateful. "Coming from you, that almost sounds like forgiveness." Was it forgiveness? I considered the question as I placed the certificate in a box. Cameron had benefited from his father's machinations, had accepted accolades for my work, had been complicit in my invisibility. But in the end, he had also acknowledged the truth, perhaps not publicly, but to me, when it mattered. Not forgiveness, I said finally. Understanding. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. He stood, preparing to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Green, I always knew you were the better officer. I just didn't know how to live with that knowledge. And now I'm going to earn whatever comes next, the way you did. After he left, I sat alone in my half-packed office, reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. 6 years of shadows followed by this sudden, blinding light of recognition. It didn't feel like victory, not exactly. It felt like restoration, like a long-held breath finally released. That evening, I called my father, eager to share the details I hadn't been able to discuss until the official announcements were made. Holloway's out, I told him after explaining the situation. Complete disgrace. My father was quiet for a moment. And how do you feel about that? The question caught me off guard. How did I feel? I searched for the right word. Vindicated, I said finally. But not happy, exactly. It's complicated. The best kind of victory always is, my father replied. If you'd taken him down out of vengeance, you'd feel differently. But you didn't. You just kept doing your best work until the truth couldn't be ignored anymore. I had help, I acknowledged, thinking of Sullivan's quiet investigation, of the sources he'd mentioned who had recognized my work when official records didn't. I wasn't completely alone. Of course you weren't. People of integrity recognize each other, Natalie. Even in the shadows. His voice softened with pride. I always knew you'd find your light, just didn't know it would come with $75 million. I laughed, the sound releasing some of the tension I'd been carrying for days. The money's for the defense contract, Dad, not for me personally. I know, but still, my daughter, a lieutenant colonel with budget authority over $75 million. Your mother would have been so proud. The mention of my mother, gone 5 years now to cancer, brought a familiar ache, but it was softer now, cushioned by the certainty that she would indeed have been proud. She had been the one who taught me that integrity wasn't a strategy. It was a way of being in the world. I report to the Pentagon next week, I told him. New office, new team, new challenges. And Holloway's shadow nowhere in sight, my father added. About damn time. The week passed in a blur of farewells, briefings, and preparations. My squad organized a small private celebration, presenting me with a shadow box containing insignia from our shared missions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, never one for sentimentality, gave a speech that left us all blinking back unexpected tears. Major, sorry, Lieutenant Colonel. You showed us what leadership really means, she said, raising a glass of sparkling cider in the on-base celebration. Not loud, not flashy, just real, whatever fancy office they put you in at the Pentagon. Don't forget, your people here knew your worth long before they pinned those new birds on your shoulders. On my final day at Fort Hood, I made one last visit to the tactical center where I'd spent countless hours developing the innovations that had finally brought me recognition. The room was quiet, the computers dormant, the whiteboards cleaned in. Preparation for the next occupants. As I stood there, absorbing the familiar space one last time, a presence in the doorway drew my attention. Commander Holloway, former commander now, stood watching me, his uniform absent, the highest-ranking insignia that had been stripped from him. Green, he said, his voice rough with what might have been emotion or simply fatigue. Sir, I replied. Automatically, then corrected myself. Mr. Holloway. He winced slightly at the civilian address, but didn't comment on it. Instead, he entered the room slowly, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. This is where you did it all, he said. All those innovations they're crediting you for now? I nodded, wary of his purpose here, unsure what to expect from this man who had systematically undermined my career for 6 years. He ran a hand along one of the workstations, his expression distant. You know, when you first arrived at Fort Hood, I saw your record. Top of your class, commendations, tactical brilliance. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I saw a threat. The admission was so unexpected, so blunt, that for a moment I couldn't respond. A threat? Finally managed. To Cameron's advancement, to my legacy. He shook his head, a gesture of self-recrimination. I convinced myself I was protecting my son, preparing him for greatness, but really I was just afraid. Afraid you would outshine him. And you did, despite everything I did to prevent it. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get from Joseph Holloway. Not, "I'm sorry for what I did, but I'm sorry you proved me right about your capabilities. Your son is a good officer," I said, offering the olive branch. "Without your shadow, he might become a great one." Holloway considered this, then nodded once, accepting the assessment. "Perhaps." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "The Pentagon is a different kind of battlefield, Green. Politics and power. Plays that make Fort Hood look straightforward. Watch your six." With that parting advice, warning, threat, he was gone, leaving me alone in the tactical center with the echoes of 6 years' worth of work and struggle, and finally, vindication. The next morning, as I prepared to leave Fort Hood for the last time, I found a small package outside my quarters. No note, no card, just a small box, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a set of vintage lieutenant colonel insignia, women's style, the kind that had become scarce as uniform regulations changed over the decades. I knew immediately who they had belonged to. Cameron had mentioned once, in a rare moment of genuine conversation, that his grandmother had been one of the first female lieutenant colonels in the Army, serving during a time when women in command were even rarer than they were now. It was a peace offering, an acknowledgement, perhaps even a blessing. I pinned the vintage insignia to my uniform, alongside the new ones I had received at the ceremony. Old and new, tradition and progress, shadow and light, all part of the complex tapestry that had become my military career. As I drove through Fort Hood's gates for the final time, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the base that had shaped me, challenged me, and ultimately recognized me. 6 years of invisibility had taught me to see clearly. 6 years of being underestimated had taught me my true strength. I was Lieutenant Colonel Natalie Green now, visible, validated, victorious. But more importantly, I was still the officer who had stood silently in the shadows, doing excellent work not for recognition, but because excellence was its own reward. That officer, that woman of integrity and resilience, was the one I was taking with me to the Pentagon. The one whose quiet strength had never depended on anyone else's approval. The one who had never actually been invisible at all. 1 year later, I stood in my Pentagon office watching the late afternoon. Sun cast long shadows across the Potomac. My window offered a view of Arlington National Cemetery, rows of white headstones reminding me daily of the ultimate purpose behind our tactical innovations and defense contracts, protecting the lives of those who served. The transition from Fort Hood to the Pentagon had been surprisingly smooth. Michael Sullivan had prepared the ground well, introducing me to key allies, warning me about potential adversaries, and providing crucial context for the political landscape I was entering. The $75 million defense contract, focused on developing advanced communication systems for combat zones, was progressing ahead of schedule and under budget, earning commendations from the Joint Chiefs. "Colonel Green?" My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 4 o'clock is here." "Send them in," I replied, turning from the window. The door opened to reveal a young captain, fresh-faced and nervous, clutching a folder to her chest like armor. Captain Jessica Daniels, recently transferred from Fort Bragg with a reputation for tactical brilliance and unconventional thinking, exactly the kind of officer I had been a decade ago. "Captain Daniels," I greeted her, extending my hand. "Welcome to the Strategic Innovation Team." "Thank you, Colonel," she replied, her handshake firm despite her obvious nervousness. "It's an honor to join your team." I gestured toward the sitting area in my office. Comfortable chairs arranged around a low table, deliberately informal to encourage open communication. "Please, have a seat." "Coffee?" "Yes, please," she said, sinking into a chair and placing her folder carefully on the table. As I poured coffee from the carafe my assistant had prepared, I studied Captain Daniels more carefully. Her uniform was impeccable, her posture military perfect even seated, but her eyes darted around my office, taking in the framed commendations, the tactical models, the books on strategy and leadership. "Your commanding officer at Fort Bragg speaks very highly of you," I said, handing her a mug. "Colonel Martinez says your communication protocol innovations saved lives during the Jordan deployment." Her eyes widened slightly. "You spoke with Colonel Martinez directly?" "I did." I settled into the chair across from her. "I make it a point to speak personally with the commanding officers of everyone I bring onto this team." "I didn't realize I'd been specifically selected, Colonel." I smiled. "Every member of this team is here because I chose them, Captain. Your file caught my attention 6 months ago when your tactical analysis crossed my desk. I've been tracking your work since then." Captain Daniels looked simultaneously flattered and alarmed, a combination I recognized intimately. Being seen, really seen, after operating in the background was always disorienting. Now, I said, gesturing to her folder, I believe you have something to show me. She hesitated. It's just a preliminary concept, Colonel. A different approach to battlefield communication security that incorporates some elements of civilian encryption technology. She bit her lip. It's unconventional. My previous CO before Martinez called it interesting but impractical. I held out my hand for the folder. I'll be the judge of that. For the next hour, Captain Daniels walked me through her concept, gaining confidence as she explained the technical details, the potential applications, the lives that could be saved by reducing communication vulnerabilities in hostile territory. Her eyes lit up. When she discussed the specifics, her hands gesturing expressively as she outlined scenarios where her protocol would make the critical difference, I recognized the passion, the conviction, the courage to think beyond established doctrine. This is excellent work, Captain, I said when she had finished. Genuinely innovative. With your permission, I'd like to incorporate elements of this into our current contract development phase. She blinked, clearly not having expected such immediate approval. Of course, Colonel. I'd be honored. I'm also assigning you as lead on the Thompson communication module, I continued. It's a significant responsibility, but I believe you're ready for it. The Thompson module? But that's... She stopped herself, but not before I caught her surprise. One of our highest priority developments? I finished for her. Yes, it is. Is that a problem, Captain? No, Colonel, not at all. She straightened her shoulders. Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down. As she gathered her materials to leave, I made a decision. Captain Daniels, there's something I'd like you to understand about how I run this team. She paused, attentive. I believe in recognizing excellence wherever I find it, I said. Rank, background, connections, none of that matters to me. Results do. Innovation does. Integrity does. I met her eyes directly. Your work will always be credited properly here. Your contributions will be recognized. Your voice will be heard. Something in my tone must have conveyed the weight behind these words, the personal history that made them not just professional courtesy, but moral imperative. I appreciate that, Colonel, she said quietly. More than I can say. After she left, I returned to the window, watching as shadows lengthened across Arlington's rolling hills. Full circle, I thought. From overlooked major to lieutenant colonel, ensuring others wouldn't be overlooked. There was a symmetry to it. That felt right, like the closing of a complex equation. My phone buzzed with a text message. Michael Sullivan, checking in as he often did. Heard about your new captain. Martinez says she's brilliant, but was being sidelined at her previous post. Sound familiar? I smiled as I typed my response. History doesn't always have to repeat itself. Some cycles can be broken. His reply came quickly. Precisely why you're where you are now, Colonel Green. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave for the day, my assistant delivered a small package that had arrived by courier. Special delivery from Fort Bragg, Colonel, she said, placing it on my desk. The package bore no return address, but I knew immediately who had sent it. I opened it carefully to find a handwritten note and a small, wooden box. Green, the note read in Cameron's distinctive handwriting. Thought you should have this. It belongs with someone who earned it properly. See, inside the wooden box lay a single medal, the bronze star his father had given him after the mission I had salvaged in the dust storm, the one he had received for exceptional leadership during critical conditions that had rightfully been mine. I held the medal in my palm, feeling its weight, physical and symbolic. This wasn't just a piece of metal. It was an acknowledgement, an apology, a closing of accounts. I thought about calling Cameron, then decided against it. Some gestures needed no response beyond acceptance. We had said our goodbyes at Fort Hood. This was simply the final period at the end of that sentence. Instead, I placed the medal in my desk drawer rather than displaying it with my other commendations. This one wasn't about public recognition. It was about private reconciliation, about two officers acknowledging a shared past and moving beyond it in their own ways. My phone rang, interrupting my reflections. My father's name appeared on the screen. Hey, Dad, I answered, leaning back in my chair. Is this a bad time? Colonel, he asked, still getting used to my new rank with paternal pride. Never for you. What's up? Just checking in. Your mother's birthday has me feeling sentimental. I glanced at the calendar and realized he was right. Today would have been her 70th birthday. I've been thinking about her too, I admitted. about what she would think of all this. She'd be proud, my father said, without hesitation, but not surprised. She always said you had the right kind of strength. The right kind? Quiet strength. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that shows up in actions, not words. He cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rougher. The kind that stands up after being knocked down and just keeps doing what's right. I thought about Fort Hood, about Holloway, about years of invisibility followed by this sudden, brilliant light of recognition, about Captain Daniels and the opportunity to break the cycle for another deserving officer. I learned that from both of you, I said softly. Maybe, my father conceded. But you perfected it, Natalie. You turned patience into power. After we hung up, I gathered my things to leave, switching off the desk lamp and taking one last look around my office, the space that represented not just my current position, but the journey that had brought me here. The shadows and light, the struggles and triumphs, the silence and, finally, the recognition. As I walked through the Pentagon's long corridors toward the exit, I passed other officers, some who nodded in recognition, others too absorbed in their own concerns to notice me. Once, being overlooked had felt like a wound. Now I understood it simply as the natural state of a complex organization, neither personal slight nor particular honor. True recognition wasn't about medals or ceremonies, though those had their place. It was about impact, the lives saved by my tactical innovations, the junior officers who would benefit from my mentorship, the military that would be incrementally better because I had served within it with integrity. Outside, the Washington evening was cool and clear, stars appearing one by one above the monuments and memorials that defined the city's skyline. I paused, looking back at the Pentagon's imposing structure, thinking of Captain Daniels reviewing the opportunity I had just given her, perhaps experiencing the same mixture of excitement and disbelief I had felt when Sullivan first took notice of my work. The circle was complete. The invisible officer had become the one who ensured others would be seen. I had stood silently in the shadows once, watching as others received credit for my innovations, my strategies, my hard work. I had maintained my dignity, my integrity, my faith that excellence would eventually speak for itself. And it had. Not through vengeance or vindication, but through the steady accumulation of truth that could no longer be denied. Through the quiet power of doing what was right when no one was watching. Until finally, someone was. Lieutenant Colonel Natalie Green. No longer invisible, no longer silent, but still at my core, the same officer who had learned the most valuable lesson of all. True honor isn't measured in public accolades or official recognition, but in the courage to remain standing when others would have you fall, the integrity to excel when no one is watching, and the wisdom to know that your worth was never dependent on their acknowledgement in the first place. Some victories aren't announced with medals and ceremonies. The most important ones unfold in silence, in the private knowledge that you remained true to yourself when it would have been easier not to. Those are the victories that last.